we're live. And it's exactly 2 o'clock, so I'm going to call this special meeting of the Board of County Commissioners to order. Can I get a roll call, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Sorry, I'm getting a feedback.
Yeah, so am I. Could everybody who's not talking please mute, because we're getting a lot of feedback?
Okay, I think we're good. Okay, so Commissioner Anna Hansen,
Present.
Commissioner Hank Hughes,
Present.
Commissioner Henry Roy Ball,
I believe he's online. Yeah, Henry, are you on? Commissioner Roybal, are you on WebEx? Daniel, do you see Commissioner Roybal?
Madam Chair, yes, I do see Commissioner Roybal.
Here, Madam Chair.
He's excellent. Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Rudy Garcia, Chair Anna Hamilton.
I'm here.
You have quorum, Madam Chair.
Excellent. So the next item is approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes? It's a pretty short agenda. No. So what's the
No,
pleasure?
Madam Chair.
Thank you. So I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? That takes us to item 2, which is miscellaneous. Request approval of an order imposing tax rates on the net taxable value of property allocated to the appropriate governmental units within Santa Fe County for the 2022 tax year. And we'll go straight to Yvonne, Director Herrera. Are you on?
I am green. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? The request before you is approving the tax rates for tax year 2022 pursuant to Section 738.3 of the New Mexico statutes. The Secretary of the New Mexico Department of Finance Administration is to issue a written order to set the property tax mill rates for the 33 counties within New Mexico by September 1st. In that same statute, it requires that the county commissioners issue its own written order imposing the said tax rates on the net taxable value of property allocated to the appropriate government units. The county received DFA's order on September 1st. The order and the certificate of property tax rates were attached to the packet for today's meeting. If we look at the memo that was attached to the packet, within the memo we provided an example of what a taxpayer would see, or how a taxpayer would be impacted, a Santa Fe County resident and non-resident, on if a resident taxpayer would pay $185.33 per $100,000, and a non-resident taxpayer would see a bill of $395 per $100,000 assessed. The memo also provided just a summary of the taxing entities and the rates for tax year 2022. Residential versus non-residential, as well as the 2 special districts within Santa Fe County. What we also provided the board as part of the packet was the impact of the tax rates, the 2022 tax rates versus the 2021 tax rates for the different taxing entities. As you can see on the screen, you'll see where we have mill rates that went down or mill rates that went up for the various tax entities. Most of that is going to be related to the I apologize, what's the calculation? Yes, yield control, excuse me. So within the yield control, they take into account inflation as well as the assessed properties that the assessor reported for for the tax year. And this year, this year DFA ended up using the max inflation rate of 5%. At the same time, the values that the assessor provided for tax year 22 actually increased. When I looked it up before the meeting, the taxable values for tax year 2021 were 6.1 billion, whereas the taxable values for tax year 2022 were 8.5. So depending on the entity, the combination of those two actually either increased the mill rate or decreased it. So basically, most entities saw a fluctuation of both. So the operational mill rate went up or down, and for the most part, many of the debt service rates kind of were consistent. The way that Santa Fe County tends to manage its debt to keep the debt service mill rate consistent from year to year. And the last attachment to show the board would be the actual property tax rates that were provided by DFA. You'll see that the report is actually significantly different than what was presented in the past. In the past, the new reports that DFA provided, I think, are a lot easier to read. They're broken out so you can actually see the actual taxing units impacted by the tax district, and whether or not that there's an actual tax unit within that district. So on the first page, we have the Pojoaque district, in which case includes the Northern New Mexico College, as well as the Pojoaque and the Espanola School District. And as you can see, the rates are detailed within the report, and it goes through 3 different districts. Let me scroll down, take a little bit. I'm going too fast, excuse me, Chair.
And it's separately.
So we have the Pojoaque district, I believe Santa Fe, and Moriarty might be the other one. And I think I freaked out the computer. I think I went too.
Yeah, Moriarty. Pretty good to be able to freak out the computer.
We're sharing. Okay, Madam Chair, Commissioners. So we have the Pojoaque, or I'm sorry, the Espanola, and then we have, I apologize, Pojoaque and Espanola School District, and then the next district is Moriarty, and then the final taxing entity is Santa Fe School District. With that, Madam Chair, Commissioners, I stand for any questions.
Great, thanks very much, Director. So, are there questions?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Garcia? And then
Thank you, Madam
Commissioner
Chair. So on Exhibit A, where on the spreadsheet is Moriarty or Santa Fe Public Schools? I actually see,
Chair Hamilton, Commissioner Garcia, on page 3 of attachment A begins the Moriarty School District,
okay.
and that goes to page 4. So 3 and 4 is Moriarty, and then page 5 and 6 is Santa Fe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So can you explain to me the difference between the yield control and the mill levy? How that works and what we're actually looking at and how it affects our taxpayer throughout the county?
Chair Hamilton, Commissioner Garcia, so the yield control I apologize. I don't know that I know enough about it to provide an appropriate response. But the yield control is a function of the calculation that DFA uses to determine the mill rates. It's based upon, when I was looking at it earlier, there's a bunch of components to the yield calculation, which starts off with information from the prior tax year. It takes into account the collection rate of property taxes, inflation, the previous year's mill rate, the current year expected mill rate based upon specifically related to debt, whether or not the entity had new debt, whether or not they paid off debt.
Bless you.
Thank you. It's it's a pretty complicated spreadsheet calculation that goes from through different steps in the process to determine the operational as well as the debt to come up with the proposed mill levy that would be taxed based on the operating or for the operating rate, and then separately for the debt service rate. I unfortunately don't know enough about how the calculation works to tell you, to provide anything else other than what I saw it do within the calculation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the yield control is actually based off of property valuation for all 33 counties. So every county in the state of New Mexico has a different mill levy based off of valuation.
The valuation is, from what I saw, the valuation is specific to that taxing entity. So within the calculation, so the information that the assessor provides the state based upon the valuation of the different districts. So for instance, on the looking at page 5, up at above the tax district, you have C in R, and then you have C in NR, which is county in resident, county in non-resident. Each of those has a separate taxable value. And those individual values for those districts is what's included within the yield calculation. So it would be different throughout, not only throughout the county, but throughout the state.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So our yield control is safe to say that it's based off of our valuation. Then that's the state legislature actually through DFA creates the mill levy. The mill levy allows counties basically borrowing power to go out there and borrow additional money if needed. So my question is, in the last year, so we're actually operating off of last year's valuation / budget. So this year, the county assessor's office has picked up an additional $1 billion of valuation for Santa Fe County. So that's new valuation that my colleagues here and the entire county is actually going to be looking at. That's a lot of valuation. So, and we see Santa Fe growing, the city out, we see it growing. And so do you know how this actually will affect us, my colleagues, the county, the taxpayer, in the next years to come, as into if our valuation has rose $1 billion in valuation, how do they look at the how do they look at the yield control as well as the mill levy, do you know?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Garcia, there's two components to the yield control. If I understood what was previously explained to me, there's the yield control ensures that the property valuations that continue, the existing property valuations that are currently on the tax rolls, that if the values continue to rise, that the yield control prevents limits the taxable amount on the property so that it doesn't just keep going up and up and up and up and up. But the yield control isn't applicable to brand new properties in that first year, so the clock kind of starts over. So I'm unable to I don't know how much of that additional valuation that we saw this year is brand-new property versus just increased prices because of how Santa Fe is growing, inflation, whatever happens to be. So I would expect that there'd be a component of those two within that valuation. So it's a little bit, you'd have to actually split out those two to determine how much of that is actually truly new valuation that's increasing, that is helping with new revenue versus being limited because it's existing property. The valuation of that property keeps increasing, but we're not going to keep taxing on that because so that's not up and down significantly from year to year.
So, Madam Chair, so what's happening in Santa Fe County, other counties, Lincoln County, Curry County, there's no growth in those counties. And so what's happening in Santa Fe County, there's a lot of growth out there. And so the $1 billion of new value, the value of the $1 billion is actually based off of new construction, new properties. And so whenever prices, which is unfortunate, to go from a $300,000 house to a $600,000 house, by state law, the tax assessor can only increase that individual's by 3% every year. So if you sell your house for $900,000 and you bought it for $3 million, you can only be taxed 3% every single year. And that's something that the state legislature is actually looking at. So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is the more valuation we have, and we have a great bond rating. And so the county, Santa Fe County, is doing very well. And thanks to our tax assessor, all the employees of Santa Fe County. But I just wanted to make my colleagues actually aware of that, because as we look into future programs in the next years to come, this is something where we need to start thinking, as we do, a little bit more outside the box as into how we can help out our local communities. And as Commissioner Hughes knows, homeless stuff is out there. We can play and move around and work with our GRT tax as we have done and we are doing. We do have our cash reserves that are there. And I think, there was a presentation to the state legislature the other day in regards to the state of New Mexico has the highest death rates from alcohol, higher than.
Is this all relevant to the mill levy we're talking about today?
Yes, because this is actually telling us by the mill levy actually being affected, this means that Santa Fe County can actually think outside the box, because we actually are doing very well on our valuation end. That's what I have to say. Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, all of this actually has to deal with the county's budget in reality. Thank you.
I have to go to Commissioner Hanson, but I think Manager Schaefer has something in regard to what was just said.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just wanted to add to some of the observations that Finance Director Herrera had made. Yield control takes into account, the growth in existing value as well as inflation in order to constrain the amount of revenue that government can actually take in on existing value. In a nutshell, is what yield control does. Inflation, however, is capped at 5%, so we've been experiencing higher levels of inflation, but nonetheless, for purposes of yield control, it's capped by statute at 5%. So in a hyperinflation environment like we experienced over the last year, the statute actually results in local governments being able to take in less revenue than is necessary to meet inflation, and that's by design. There was some observations and discussions about actual new value, so new construction, and as Yvonne explained, that comes onto the tax rolls. It's not subject to yield control in the first year. That actually represents new money, if you will, to the county based upon that new value that comes onto the tax rolls. And then finally, with regard to general obligation bond debt, that calculation doesn't run through yield control. That's a straight mathematical calculation of what your debt service requirements are versus what your value is. So all of the things being equal, if value goes up, the debt service rate should come down. I just wanted to summarize a few of those points. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Excuse me? Thank you. Commissioner Hanson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So from what I saw in the beginning here, Santa Fe's tax rate will not be going up. Am I reading this correctly?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hanson, correct. The Santa Fe County itself, we plan our debt service mill rate to be consistent from year to year, and we actually are seeing a small decrease in our operational mill rate.
That's what, I just wanted to make sure that I
Yes.
was reading everything correctly. Thank you. Then, in general terms, and maybe you can't answer this, and I understand that, and maybe this is a question for the assessor, is how much is the value of all of the properties in Santa Fe County?
So all of Santa Fe County?
Yeah,
The taxable value or the assessed value? I'm sorry, I apologize.
assessed value.
Oh, I didn't actually write that down, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, then what's the,
Madam Chair, sorry, Commissioner Hanson, I wrote down 8.5 billion in taxable value. 8.5.
8.5.
Yeah.
So it's obviously higher than that. In
Yes, yes.
Okay. And then my understanding, and maybe I misunderstood Commissioner Garcia, is that the 3% stays on a house as long as you own it. Once you sell it, then it goes to the new tax rate, and then they have the 3% again, but it gets changed and raised when a house is sold. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. Would you say that the assessed value and the actual value is probably double or more?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hanson, I'm not sure.
Okay, I understand. That's not a question. I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have a question on one of the answers, but I know Manager Schaefer had some input on what was just said, and then I'll go to Commissioner Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners, and then just, a slight emphasis. What's capped if you are an owner of residential property is the value, not the rate. And so I believe there may have just been a slight misstatement to say that you come to the current rate, you come to current value. I understood that was what was intended, but I just wanted to make that clear for the record. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Manager.
And is the net value of everything, taxable value of everything in Santa Fe County really only $8.5 million?
Billion.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, yeah,
It sounded
billion.
like million twice to me, and I was sure that was wrong. Commissioner Hughes.
I had to count the zeros.
Thank you. I think most of my questions have been asked and answered, but I did have one more, which is, you mentioned the taxable value last year being $6-something billion and $8.5 billion this year. Do we know how much of that difference is new properties coming on the rolls, and how much is other things?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hughes, no, I don't, I'm sorry. I'd have to ask the assessor.
All right.
But of course, if all of it was existing, that increase would only be 3%. If it was all existing
Yes.
properties and all residential, because I think it's maybe different for business for properties. So some of
Okay,
it
so
has
it's
to
probably
be
mostly new, yeah.
Some of it has to be new, and some of it has to be contributed by business.
Okay, thank you.
Also sales.
Yes, Commissioner Roybal?
Oh, no, Madam Chair, I just said, also, given how many people are buying, and selling houses right now, the individuals that sold a new house, those values of those houses would come up to market value at that point. So a lot of it may be from the sales that we've had in Santa Fe County.
Absolutely. I was kind of counting that as new. Anything that comes out from under control.
Right, anything other than the 3, that comes out from under the 3% control would be newly on the market. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Roybal. Did you have more?
No, Madam Chair, I was curious, but I don't think the treasurer may be on, but I know that I'm wondering, given our circumstances, we're in a high inflation right now, and I wanted to kind of see if we could get an idea of how many houses and how many constituents are behind on taxes, and how that would affect them. I think that if it's an existing home, of course, they only go up 3%. And it sounds like our mill levy really isn't changing as far as taxes going up is what I was kind of hearing from comments from Commissioner Hanson as well. But I'm just concerned right now because I think people are struggling to pay their taxes. So really, that's my only comment.
Thank you. Are there more questions, Commissioner Hanson?
In response to Commissioner Roybal, I've asked our assessor, Gus Martinez, to give a presentation sometime in October, and we had talked about that, and I'm also recognizing him for with a proclamation in October. So I think that he can bring us up to speed on a lot of these questions that people have right now.
Excellent, thank you. Are there further questions, or what's the pleasure of the board?
Second.
What are you moving? Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any abstentions or opposition? Thank you. So this motion passes. That takes us to concluding business. Are there any announcements? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Second?
Thank you. Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for doing this special meeting.